everyone, Jim Branscombe here for the Cinemati vlog. Today I'm going to talk about some of my favorite genre movie soundtracks. Now, this was a big thing when I was really getting a cult cinema, especially when I was also getting the punk rock and I started collecting vinyl. So one of the things I would do when I would, sometimes you couldn't, punk record stores wouldn't have it, but when you go to other record stores, I would always look in the soundtrack bin. Another thing I used to do was if it was stuff that stuff like Lucio Fulci's The Beyond, which had that really amazing score by Fabio Frizzi, or any of the Argento Goblin scores. If I couldn't find a record or tape or even a CD of it, I would take my VCR and hook it up to my tape deck, and I would record music cues on a cassette tape. So I made my own compilation of horror movie soundtracks. I remember doing that with John Carpenter's Halloween, just recording the opening credits theme, and then I had it on tape, and then it was a weird way to do it, but in the 90s, there were soundtracks out there, but I just wasn't finding them, and I just wanted to be able to listen to them without having to just watch the movie. So I'd make all these horror movie soundtracks. Now, late 90s and early 2000s, when I would go to New York every couple of months because I had a friend that lived up there and start hitting the record stores up there, it became much easier to find horror movie soundtracks, specifically the Italian stuff. Every time I would go up there, I'd find a different, I think it was Draco Red or something like that, was reissuing all the Goblin soundtracks from the Argento films, and I would just grab those, and there would be Ennio Morricone stuff, and, it was a plethora of stuff, and, they were $20, and now vinyl is really ridiculously expensive. So I'm just going to share some of my favorite soundtracks. This is not going to be all my favorite because these are the ones I still have on vinyl. There's a bunch of stuff that I had and ended up selling years ago because when you collect records and accumulate stuff, sometimes you're like, hey, I got too much stuff. Other times hey, I'm really broke, so I'm going to sell something that I know is worth money and maybe I'll get it back later, and that never pans out, so then you're just out the record. So I'm just going to go through a few of my favorite soundtracks. This is Videodrome by Howard Shore. Picked this up, sometime in the 2000s. I think I won it off eBay. I'm sure it's a reissue, not original. Let's see, is there a copyright on here? But anyway, yeah, I got this, and it's really interesting because the score is, obviously it's in the movie, but it's kind of a different experience when you listen to it on record. I used to smoke weed and put this on and put on some Stan Brackett shorts from the Criterion Collection and just zone out and listen to this soundtrack. Completely different experience than how it plays in the movie. I gotta figure out where I'll put this stuff as I'm doing this. Put that there. I've already talked about this one. This was a holy grail for a long time. John Carpenter and Alan Howarth's Halloween 3 Season of the Witch score. I have the Mondo reissue, the first Mondo reissue, and this is original. That one of my prized possessions. If there's one record I will never sell, it will be this one. Let's keep going here. Reissue, but this is my personal favorite George Romero movie, which is Martin. This is a great soundtrack by Donald Rubinstein. I just, I picked it up. I really love this score. One of my favorite movies. It's a different kind of vibe. It's, kind of eerie and a little bit jazzy. It's definitely good. This was a birthday gift from my friends Deanna Rooney and Jonah Ray. This is a picture disc version of the soundtrack to Return of the Living Dead. Obviously, this is more the punk's soundtrack, so you got the Cramps and that kind of stuff on here. I won't show you the back of it because it's Linnea Quigley, and there's a little piece of wardrobe that's missing, which will probably get this video flagged if I show you that other side, but I'm sure you know what it is. This was a recent release on Terrorvision. This is the soundtrack to Neon Maniacs, one of my favorite underrated horror movies, monster movies. It's a great score. The only thing I wish that was on here is one of the Power Pop songs by Rick Bowles, Baby Lied. I wish it had that stuff on here, but the soundtrack itself is pretty cool and, really good record. Now I'm getting down to the Goblin record. So this is one of the Mondo Death Waltz releases. This is the soundtrack to Suspiria. For some reason, in the early 2000s, I never picked this up for whatever reason, but I got this at Beyond Fest, and yes, that's Dario's signature, humble brag, whatever, blah, blah, blah. This is one of those reissues in, what was the label? It's Dago Red, not Drago, Dago Red. So this is a 2000-ish reissue of Deep Red. This happens to be signed by members of Goblin. Two actually played on. The other ones were you know, from Cinemati's Demonia that were filling in for when Goblin did their first US tour. This is, I think I got the sound signed in 2012 at Beyond Fest when they played 3 shows. This one is the first Goblin soundtrack I actually got when I went up to New York. This is Dawn of the Dead. This is where I discovered that, like, you know, the Goblin cues weren't the only thing in the movie, and realized there's a bunch of those library cues. Because, I mean, I knew the Gonk was, but, like, there's a couple tracks on there that I was, like, really excited to listen to. And I was like, why aren't they on here? Because they were library cues, but they're really interesting library cues. So, you know, more to get the full soundtrack, you need the Goblin and the library cue one. I think Waxwork just put that out, but... And here's another one. This is probably my favorite. I know it's not technically Goblin, but it's a Goblin score. It's for Tenebrae. This is my favorite of their scores. This is another one of those reissues. So I think, yeah, 2001 is when this came out. And last but certainly not least, this is, you know, score by Bruno Nicolai. It's for the Red Queen Kills 7 Times. This is a newer release, which is also on. This came out on Decca and Cam. Really nice reissue. Great movie, great soundtrack. I'd love to screen this movie at some point, but right now, don't know who has theatrical rights and haven't found a print or anything screenable yet. So one of these days, it's a bucket list, but it's also a fantastic score. So these are some of my favorite soundtracks. Sound off the comments or hit us up on social media. Tell me what your favorite soundtracks to horror movies or maybe non-horror movies, just movies in general are. Until next time, see you in the void.